Hogwarts hospital wing became a makeshift fortress. Auras were posted at the door. Inside, behind curtains, Harry had an arm bandaged, while Cedric endured checks for curses and psychological shock. Dumbledore, wearing a grave expression, spoke quietly with them. Harry recounted in broken detail all that had happened in the graveyard, from the moment they touched the cup to the moment Cedric disarmed Pettigrew. Cedric chimed in with his perspective, describing the fear he'd felt, the surge of adrenaline that had saved his life. At times, Dumbledore's knuckles went white on the arms of his chair. He shared a quick glance with Snape, who hovered behind him with a steeled expression. "So," Dumbledore murmured at last. The Triwizard Cup was a port key, designed to deliver the first to touch it to that graveyard. The Dark Lord's plan was to use Harry's blood in a ritual. His voice trembled with suppressed anger. "Yet, thanks to your quick action, Cedric, you managed to disarm Pettigrew before he could kill you, and the ritual was never completed." Cedric swallowed. "Harry saved me just as much as I saved him," he insisted. "Without him, I'd have been outnumbered, or Merlin knows. We just reacted." Dumbledore leaned forward, placing a hand on each boy's shoulder. "Your reaction demonstrated remarkable bravery and presence of mind. I shall see that your names are properly honored for this. But, my boy, you must know, the danger is far from over. The item Pettigrew carried, that stunted form, is indeed the Dark Lord's present manifestation. We have him under guard, but I cannot say what he might be capable of even in that state. I will do everything in my power to keep you both safe. But there are complicated political forces at play." Harry's gaze flickered to the corner of the ward where Cornelius Fudge was pacing. The Minister of Magic had arrived with a small retinue of officials, each wearing anxious expressions. Fudge seemed utterly stupefied that they now had proof of Voldemort's partial return. He kept adjusting his lime green bowler hat, muttering, "Impossible. Must be some trick. Can't be," as if denial would will away reality. Not long after, the rest of the Weasley family, who had come to watch the final task, along with Hermione and Ron, burst in, their faces twisted in shock and relief. Amos Diggory arrived, colliding with Cedric in an almost suffocating hug. The emotional meltdown that followed was an eruption of relief, tears, anger, and confusion. Cedric, tears in his own eyes, patted his father's back. "Dad, it's okay, I'm fine," he murmured. I'm here." In the midst of this swirl of emotional chaos, Dumbledore cleared his throat. "For now, let us focus on healing. Later, we will speak more of what must be done." That night, Hogwarts was anything but calm. Rumors spread at the speed of a Quidditch pass. Some said that a monstrous baby had tried to kill Harry. Others whispered that Cedric had been turned into a vampire. The truth was even more shocking and soared from ear to ear, uniting fear and hope in the hearts of the wizarding populace. The Dark Lord had nearly returned, but had been thwarted. In the Great Hall the following morning, Cedric and Harry, both bandaged and exhausted, joined the other students for an impromptu gathering Dumbledore had called. The house tables were abuzz with speculation. A hush fell as the headmaster rose. His voice, more solemn than ever, carried through the hall. "Last night, 2 of our students showed valor, loyalty, and resourcefulness in preventing a terrible tragedy. The Triwizard Cup, as many of you have heard, was turned into a portkey by those who wished to bring about the resurrection of Lord Voldemort." Sharp gasps rippled through the hall. Younger students shivered at the mention of the Dark Lord's name, while older ones exchanged troubled looks. Dumbledore continued, "Thanks to Mr. Cedric Diggory and Mr. Harry Potter, that plot was foiled. Both of them returned at great personal risk, bringing the evidence we need to confirm that he who calls himself the Dark Lord still endangers our world." He motioned to Cedric and Harry, indicating for them to rise. Cedric, heart pounding, stood, noticing how every eye in the school pinned upon him. In Hufflepuff's corner, he saw tears welling in many eyes. Hannah Abbott, Susan Bones, Ernie Macmillan. The rest of the hall erupted into applause. It wasn't the typical polite clapping for a Quidditch match or good performance. This was relief, gratitude, and fervid admiration. Cedric felt his cheeks flush, but he stood a little taller. Beside him, Harry looked equally uncomfortable, yet resolute. Amidst the ovation, Dumbledore held up a hand to quiet the hall. "I must also urge caution," he said gravely. "We have not destroyed the Dark Lord, but only halted his immediate return. He remains a very real threat. I beseech you all to stand united in these trying times." He took a deep breath, allowing the seriousness of his words to seep into every corner of the room. Then, in a gentler tone, he concluded, "That said, the Triwizard Tournament has ended, and in my eyes, these two have certainly earned the right to share the victory. Let us celebrate their bravery." A more gentle round of applause broke out. Cedric felt an ache in his chest, partly from the bruises he nursed, partly from the overwhelming swirl of emotions. He had looked death in the face and survived to be here. He and Harry exchanged a tiny, grateful smile. The day progressed in a surreal blur. Hogwarts tried to savor the final hours of the term, the triumph of the school champion, and the relief that Cedric Diggory was, against all odds, alive. But an undercurrent of tension ran through the corridors. Pettigrew had been handed over to a specialized aura team for trial, as had the mutated form of Voldemort. The atmosphere of victory was haunted by the knowledge that the darkest wizard of all time had almost returned, and that his influence wasn't gone. Cedric found it nearly impossible to sleep that night. In the wee hours of the morning, he left his dormitory, wearing his nightclothes and a cloak, and wandered through the silent halls. It felt like the castle was holding its breath. He didn't expect to meet anyone at this hour, but rounding a corner, he nearly walked straight into Harry. The younger wizard had the same drawn look on his face. "Couldn't sleep?" Harry asked wryly. Cedric nodded, exhaling. "Everything's changed, hasn't it? It's like we're heroes in a story I never asked to be part of." They stood in the corridor lit by the flicker of torches. Harry stared at the stone floor. "It's always been that way for me, in a sense," he said. "But now, there's no more denial for the rest of the world. Voldemort is, well, we have him imprisoned in some form, but people are scared." Cedric frowned, memories flashing across his mind. Pettigrew's watery eyes, the twisted infant shape screeching in Harry's arms, the greenish glow of the graveyard. "Harry," he murmured, "what happens now? If Voldemort can't return easily, or if he escapes in that form, or if someone else tries to help him?" Harry didn't have an answer, so they walked on, the hush wrapping around them like a heavy cloak. If anything, their conversation that night forged a stronger bond between them. The lines between house rivalry had melted away in the graveyard. The next morning, Cedric found himself summoned to a private meeting in Dumbledore's office. He discovered Harry had been summoned as well. When the two of them arrived, they were disheartened to find the Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge, perched on the edge of a chair, flanked by two stern-looking auras. One was tall, with bright purple hair, Tonks. The other was older, with flecks of grey in his mustache. Dumbledore sat behind his desk, his fingers steepled beneath his chin, waiting. "Now," Fudge began, adjusting his bowler hat with trembling hands. We need to set the record straight. These rumors, this notion that you know who is back, it's obviously disturbing the wizarding world." He cleared his throat. "Since we now have the, physical evidence, that object, they tell me it's indeed some manifestation of, he who must not be named." He paled as if uttering the words would invite doom. "Now, you two are the only ones who witnessed what actually transpired in that graveyard. I trust we can count on your honesty as we present this to the Wisengamot." Cedric exchanged a wary look with Harry. Something about Fudge's tone suggested he wished to downplay the severity. It was a notion Dumbledore must have noticed too. The headmaster's bright eyes flickered behind his half-moon spectacles. "Minister," he said, now focused on his professor. Dumbledore said quietly, "We must not bury our heads in the sand. Voldemort attempted to return, and he had help. While we have Pettigrew under arrest, and the remains of Voldemort in custody, do not forget that there are still supporters of the Dark Lord out there. Fudge coughed uncomfortably. Yes, well, obviously we'll do our best, but it won't do for the public to think the Ministry is powerless. We must find the right way to phrase this. Perhaps we say it was a failed attempt, that he remains too weak to be a real threat. Harry clenched his fist. So, you're basically going to sweep this under the rug, is that it? He snapped. Pretend that because he's not fully alive, everything's fine. Fudge bristled. Now see here, Potter, I am not sweeping anything under the rug, merely controlling the narrative so that people aren't thrown into panic. Cedric felt heat rise up his neck. With all due respect, Minister, it's bigger than that. If we lie or minimize this, people won't be prepared when he tries again. And he will. Tonks, who had remained silent, coughed gently. Minister, we've got Pettigrew's confession. It's quite damning. He was definitely preparing a ritual. It matches up with the boy's statements. I think we should proceed with caution and honesty. Her eyes flicked to Cedric and Harry, with a hint of apology that she was lumped in with Fudge's retinue. Fudge looked miserable. Yes, well, let's just, handle it delicately, shall we? Dumbledore gently cleared his throat. Minister, I shall handle the announcements here at Hogwarts. You may, if you wish, prepare a statement for the Prophet. I ask only that you refrain from discrediting or dismissing these boys' testimony. Fudge nodded grudgingly. Very well, very well. We'll, meet with Pettigrew. Interrogate him. See what more we can learn. That creature. We'll place it in the Department of Mysteries for safekeeping, but I'll need your help, Dumbledore, to ensure it's contained properly. Outside, the summer sunlight gleamed on the Great Lake, an ironic contrast to the storm that rumbled through the wizarding world's collective consciousness. In the days that followed, Harry and Cedric became the center of attention for the wizarding press. Journalists prowled the Hogwarts gates, eager to interview the heroes of the graveyard. Rita Skeeter's quill churned out sensational headlines, insinuating all sorts of conspiracies. Meanwhile, foreign correspondents praised the bravery of both young men, painting them as icons. Cedric found the sudden limelight almost unbearable. He had never sought fame. Hufflepuffs tended to value quiet diligence and fair play, not sensational stories in the media. He took to avoiding the over-curious crowds by slipping away to the lake, where at least the giant squid offered some playful distraction. Sometimes he found Harry there, fiddling with a flat stone and skipping it across the surface. They'd nod at each other, not needing words to share the solidarity of survival. One afternoon, Hermione and Ron joined them. Hermione had that look of fierce, intellectual excitement. So, they're taking Pettigrew's statement tomorrow, she said. It'll be a formal hearing. This could exonerate Sirius Black. Ron's ears turned pink. Wait, how exactly? Hermione rolled her eyes. Ron, honestly, if Pettigrew confesses he faked his own death and framed Sirius, that's proof Sirius is innocent. Harry's eyes lit up. That means I can live with Sirius. He can come out of hiding. Cedric, who didn't know the entire backstory, arched an eyebrow. That's fantastic news, Harry, he said. I'm glad something good can come of all this mess. Harry felt a swell of gratitude. Maybe Cedric was exactly the friend he needed. Someone older, but not overshadowing him, who understood the dangers in a personal way. Thanks, he murmured, gazing out over the water. Yeah, I suppose if we can prove Pettigrew's alive and working for Voldemort, Sirius can go free. They all lapsed into a warm silence, the gentle breeze rustling their hair. Hermione eventually shifted gears. But there's still the matter of Death Eaters out there, who might try to break Voldemort out of Ministry control. And not everyone is convinced. I overheard some Ravenclaws saying it's a hoax. Even with Pettigrew as evidence, the seeds of doubt are strong. Cedric frowned. That's exactly what Dumbledore feared. The Minister can't just hush it up. We need the wizarding community alert and united. Ron kicked at a pebble, sending it rolling into the shallows. Just once, I'd like a year at Hogwarts without some massive existential crisis, he complained half-heartedly. earning a laugh from the others. But they all knew he had a point.